Hi YouTube, my name is Jack, and I should be packing right now. I'm getting on a plane in like 11 hours to fly back out west and visit my mom. I have not packed yet. I do not like packing, so I'm going to do this instead. Today I want to talk about a cluster of assumptions that I think generally get made about religion as a concept, but that are taken from a particularly Christian perspective, and so don't apply to other religions such as Wicca. I think that a lot of the time when I sort of interact with people out in society who find out that I'm Wiccan, even if they've heard of Wicca, even if they're familiar with the existence of such a thing as Wicca, a lot of the questions that they ask just don't apply, really, to a Wiccan point of view, because these questions are assuming that religion is a certain way and does a certain thing that's actually pretty unique to Christianity. Um, these thoughts that I'm going to share are by no means unique or original. This is an ongoing conversation that a lot of other people have had. Thorn Mooney, in particular, talks about this a lot in her most recent book, The Witch's Path, which is somewhere on a shelf here. She talks about sort of needing to reconceptualize secularism and to think about secularism in a different way, because a lot of people who are non-Wiccan in their witchcraft practice are still doing things that might be considered religious if we step outside of a Christian framework, and that's okay. So this is my contribution to an ongoing conversation that lots of other people are having, and I'm not necessarily the most insightful or important voice here, but it's just been on my mind. I think to me, the assumptions that get made about religion really get boiled down to one assumption in particular, which is the idea that the function of religion is explanatory. The purpose of religion is to explain, instruct, and so on. And that manifests in a variety of different ways. For one thing, you see an assumption that the purpose of religion is to explain how the world began, that religion is inherently at odds with a scientific understanding because religion requires us to adhere to a particular creation story that is going to be sort of contradictory with the best scientific evidence that we have. Right? These are like thinking about the biblical literalists who claim that the earth is only 6,000 years old and that, Noah took 2 of every animal on his ark. So that's one thing. Similarly, we have the beginning of the world. Similarly, we have eschatological questions about the end of the world, the afterlife, what happens after death. And once again, I think there's, broadly speaking, an assumption in our culture that if you are religious, part of the function of your religion is to explain to you what happens after death, to teach you what you should believe about what comes after death, in a way that is supposed to be reassuring or comforting, or to allay the anxieties that we all have about dying. And then the third big one, I think, is that people broadly assume that religion explains or grounds morality. That part of the function of religion is supposed to be to teach people how to be good, or why to be good, or which things are right and which things are wrong. And I mean, you see this all over, anytime a conversation about religion gets started on any internet forum, and the Reddit atheists descend like a horde of locusts, these are the things that they start throwing out. Is, oh, well, I don't need a god to tell me what's right and wrong. Or, oh, well, I believe in science, so I don't need the story of the Garden of Eden. And that perspective comes from the assumption that those 3 things are what religion inherently is and what religion inherently does. And that's just not true. It's true for Christianity, broadly speaking. Obviously, you're going to have, Christians who take a different view on that, right? Christianity is not a monolith any more than any other religion is. And so certainly there are going to be Christians who embrace a more scientific understanding of the origin of the universe, or, so on. But, broadly speaking, I think that the current of Christianity has been to serve as an explanatory tool for, social regulation and other things. But part of the function that Christianity has served over the course of the past 2,000 years has been to provide explanations to people, whether those are explanations about death and the afterlife, morality, the origins of the world, or so on. But that's not true of Wicca, and it's also not true, I think, of a lot of religions more broadly. So in Wicca, for one thing, with morality, we sort of expect you to figure that shit out on your own. There are certainly some people who will, take the Wiccan Rede as a core tenet of their personal philosophy. For those who aren't familiar, the Wiccan Rede is "an ye harm none, do what ye will." It's a phrase that gets tossed around sometimes in Wiccan circles. It is not a law, it's not a binding moral precept, it's sort of a guideline that some people choose to follow because they find it nice. And the basic idea of the Wiccan Rede is like, look, if you're not hurting anybody, do whatever you want. In opposition to a more Christian idea of sin, where everything is bad unless it's specifically allowed to be good. But, for the most part, particularly in initiatory Wicca, we expect you to be an adult and to understand the difference between right and wrong, and to be able to treat people well before you come into the craft. The purpose of the craft is not to teach you how to be good. It's assumed that you already know how to be good. We don't spend our time talking about that. And, my gods don't punish bad behavior and reward good behavior. My gods are just sort of doing their thing, and morality, moral, praise and blame don't factor into Wicca, really. They factor into interpersonal human relations, and insofar as Wicca is a social thing that can bring people together, obviously morality is going to be important in the way that those people interact with each other. But it's not a core part of the religion itself. It's part of the social dynamics of people who belong to the religion. And I think that's a really important distinction. Wicca itself does not attempt to explain or ground morality in any way. Similarly, Wicca doesn't have, an explanatory picture of the origin of the universe, or, whatever, why the rain falls, any of that. We follow the, general scientific evidence that's available to us for the most part. There are probably some people on the fringe who reject scientific evidence about, like, the Big Bang, but there's nothing in Wicca that says, yes, the universe was created in this way. You might find some, abstract metaphorical expressions of a deeper poetic truth at the heart of, the creation of the universe, or things like that. So you might find people who talk about the Big Bang in mythological or religious terms to find expression for some, sacred meaning in this scientific fact. But it's more that the religion is giving you a different perspective on the scientific fact, a way of approaching the scientific fact that makes it feel sacred and holy, as opposed to the religion is explaining the origin of the universe. And thirdly and finally, with the afterlife, broadly speaking, a lot of Wiccans believe in reincarnation. I think a lot of Wiccan ritual, particularly when you think about, like, the cycles of the phases of the moon or the seasons, Wiccan ritual is focused on this idea of cyclicality, of death followed by rebirth. And so there is certainly a sense in which you are more likely to be drawn to Wicca if you believe in reincarnation. But God knows, not all Wiccans do believe in reincarnation. I can think, off the top of my head, I can think of 5 people I know very, very well who are Wiccan, who think that, like, we live this life and then we die and that's done. Wicca doesn't have a required belief. And this is, I think, sort of a further extension of the idea that religion is explanatory, is that one of the questions people most often ask when they find out that you are religious and that you belong to a religious tradition that is in the minority or that they're not familiar with, they'll ask, well, what do you believe in your religion? And in Wicca, not much, right? Wicca is much more about what you do than about what you believe. People like to throw around the term orthopraxic as opposed to orthodox. I have complicated feelings about that. I think it's not entirely accurate. But broadly speaking, there's an idea in Wicca that in order to be Wiccan, you have to do certain things. So for initiatory Wicca, you have to have gone through the ritual of initiation in a particular way. And then afterward, if you're continuing to practice Wicca, you're going to show up to rituals and do certain things in your rituals, and what you believe is your business. As long as you're showing up and doing the rituals, you get to count as Wiccan. And there's no prescribed or expected belief. The idea that religion is defined in terms of belief comes from this assumption that the function of religion is to explain, and so religion gives you a set of propositions that you're supposed to believe, and these are the explanatory propositions that allow you to move in the world. The value of Wicca is not explanatory. The value of Wicca, from my perspective, and ask 5 Wiccans, you'll get 8 different answers, but from my perspective, the value of Wicca is that it provides a holy perspective, a sacred perspective on the world as it already is. So Wicca, it's like putting on, I don't know, not rose-tinted glasses, but like sacred tinted glasses. You look at the world, and it's the same world that it always was, right? The gravitational constant is still 9.81 meters per second squared. The sun still rises in the east. The changing of the seasons is still caused by the axial tilt of the Earth and its orbit around the sun. All of those things are still exactly the same. The scientific facts are still the same. But the idea is that you look out into the world and see all of those things as special, powerful, and sacred. And it's not that you're in competition with another explanatory worldview, in this case a scientific explanatory worldview. It's that whatever the explanation is for various natural phenomena, you see those phenomena as being special and powerful in a particular kind of way, and you honor and venerate those cycles or whatever. So it's about an experience of the thing rather than about a belief-based explanation of the thing. And I think that's a really significant distinction. There's potentially more that could be talked about here, right? I think there's another really interesting conversation to be had about the idea of transcendent deity, deity as a creator of the universe, versus embodied deity, deity immanent in the universe, deity present in the universe. This is my chief complaint about Freemasonry, is Freemasonry works very, very hard to be non-denominational. Well, this is not my chief complaint. My chief complaint about Freemasonry is that it's men only. But second to that, Freemasonry works very hard to be non-denominational because they really believe in the brotherhood of man, and they believe that what they're doing transcends specific religious tradition. And that's a wonderful thing, but the language of Freemasonry is still all about God as the great architect of the universe, as sort of a creator who's at a remove from the world, who builds the world and is separate from it. And I think that's fundamentally a very different picture of deity than like what we have in Wicca, where deity is in the world, deity is part of the world, deity is the world itself. And I think it is. It's an implicitly Christian view of deity. So there's that's not so much about whether religion is explanatory. That's more of a specific theological question about the nature of deity. You could ask similar questions about like personified or personal deity. I'm going to set those aside for now because I feel like this is a good wrapping up point. But yeah, like I think when we talk about religion as a culture, but also even in pagan spaces, it's very easy to import a lot of Christian assumptions about the nature of religion as a whole. And I think it's important for us to disentangle what religion is from what Christianity teaches us that religion is. Because there are lots of different ways to be religious. There are lots of different kinds of religious traditions all over the world. And the dominance of Christianity in our society has given us a bit of a filtered perspective on that, that I think is sometimes to our detriment. So I am going to wrap this up here. I'm going to go pack because I really do need to do that. Have a good one, and I will see you all soon.